After you've done your research to understand your audience and the opportunities that you can provide through your library, and then you develop a program that you think is really going to meet the needs of the audience, there's still an additional step that you need to pay attention to. That's why we wanted to take you through this promotions PowerPoint for predicting success to show you how you might appropriately promote your event, different opportunities to make it as successful as possible. There's key elements of communications that you need to understand as you move through this. If we understand these elements, we generally can be very successful in promoting and communicating what our program's all about. The first is fairly obvious. You need to understand your audience. You need to know what they care about, what their concerns are, and that's largely what you've done when you've done some of your initial market analysis. The second is to understand your issue. What is it that you want to try and present? What is the topic? What is it that's going to be of value to your audience out there? The third is you need to know what you want to achieve. Now, I know that may seem fairly obvious. You want a nice crowd, you want to have a good event, you want to have a good program. But so often we go into into any kind of communications without really thinking about what it is we want to achieve out of the communications. We present information, but we really haven't thought about how we want that information to be used. So it's an important element in communications. And then finally, once you know your audience, you know your issue, and you know what you want to achieve, the next big trick is to message appropriately. It's important that we all understand our audience. We have to ask a few basic questions when we're thinking about how we're going to successfully communicate with the audience. We have to ask ourselves what matters to them. Not what matters to us, not what our needs are, but really what their needs are and how we might fulfill them. One question that anybody who's going to be listening to you is going to be asking is, where's the benefit or where's the risk to me? When they're looking at a flyer or a poster or a email invitation to your event, those are the questions that are going through their head, and we need to think them through. Even where things like lost time will be seen as a risk. So if they were to go to an event, give up an hour to go to get there and listen and felt like it didn't fulfill their needs, that's a risk that we have to be cognizant of. We also have to consider in any good communications who influences their thoughts and behaviors. And this becomes an important part of the promotion element. We aren't going to be capable of speaking to every single individual out there that we'd like to attend our events. So instead, we need to be thinking in terms of who are the people that they listen to that might be influential in reaching them and convincing them that this is an event of real value. One of the key influencers of any audience is the general media, the mass media that's out there. Whether it's traditional newspapers or radio or television coverage, or whether it's internet coverage, people turn to the media and expect that to be the source that helps them understand and sift through some of the issues they're looking at so they can make better decisions. In understanding the media, sometimes we have to recognize the world they live in, and hence this picture, just to recognize how busy this world is, how much information they receive constantly, that phones are on, that televisions are blaring. There's a lot of different information and mix that goes on here that we have to take into consideration. In understanding the media, it's sometimes very helpful to break it into different channels because just like individuals, the media perceive news differently and present news differently. So we need to understand a little bit about how they go about doing that. When we're talking about electronic media, we're talking about news, radio, and television. For news radio, the highest priority for them, or what matters to them, is the immediacy. They're looking for information that's breaking right away. When the president's shot, for instance, the first place people go to is to the radio stations because they can get the news out there faster. News radio understands that, they compete on that reality, and so they're looking for very concise, short information that they can get out in a very quick manner. Television is very much like that as well. And television news is often looking for breaking news, the latest information out there. But the other thing we have to pay attention to is that television is an entertainment media. And as much as they're looking to inform their viewers out there, they're also looking for entertainment. So images become really critical when we're talking with television. They want to understand what your event's going to look like as much as what information is going to be presented. So keep that in mind if you're talking with television and you want to encourage television to cover your event. Now, the other category that we look at is more traditional, and we talk about print. Under print, we've got newspapers, and newspapers compete in the media world because they have greater content. They can provide greater content than television. Now, it's not always a lot of content, but even the 300 words that are the average newspaper story provide a lot more content that you're going to get in a 60-second television story. So newspapers are looking for content, and part of that content is they're also going to be looking for multiple sources. So where you may be able to tell the story, if you can also provide them with other people who can provide perspectives on your event, that's going to be valuable. That's going to make them more interested in the story you're telling. Magazines are much like newspapers in the sense that they compete by having content, but they're really about content plus. They're looking for much greater depth and usually an audience that's more tailored to the specific topic that the magazine's talking about. And then you may think this is an accident that we put talk radio under print, but the reason we did is because talk radio operates very much like print in the sense that they can't be as timely, but what they can offer is much greater content. And they can talk for a 30-minute or even a 60-minute segment about a single topic and provide great in-depth information about it. And then finally, the social media is a quickly emerging opportunity that we wanted to talk to you a little bit more as we move through here in understanding all of this. But when we're looking at this, we need to recognize that different media perceive the news differently, present the news differently, and as you're looking at how you want to promote your program, you need to think which channel is most appropriate for the information that you are presenting through your program. So one of the important things to understand is that we have to develop compelling messages for the media as well. As a key intermediary or a key influencer of the information that your audience is going to receive, we need to put the information in a way that works for them. And they're going to be asking many of the same questions that the public would ask. Does this matter? Is it compelling? And is it news? So the question then is, what is news? And most reporters perceive news in very much the same type of way. First and foremost, they're going to be asking, is this timely? An event that took place 6 weeks ago is not a news story. That's an old story. They're looking for timely information that will help them understand how to tell the story. And almost every journalist is going to see this as the highest priority when they're trying to evaluate news. Without a timeliness factor, there usually isn't a story for them. A second factor, and where real opportunity for all of you as librarians lives, is the fact that they're looking for local information. And local has become more important than ever with the emergence of the internet and the fact that people can get national and statewide news on their computer screen at the click of a screen or on their phone. The way that local radio and TV and newspaper are now competing is by presenting really hyper-local information and being able to tell the story that isn't being told everywhere else. You need to use that to your real advantage in helping to get information out there about your program. Some other factors that we should consider as when we're talking about what is news is significant. And for most reporters, this is a numbers game. They're looking at significant as how many people are influenced or how many dollar bills are being spent. Those are key elements that we'd be talking about when we're looking at significance. The other thing, and I can tell you, is that reporters tend to be real hounds for trends. They like to follow the latest trend story. When something's hot, you'll see it over and over again on TV, on radio, in newspapers, and in the media. And it's because reporters get an ear for trends and like to follow trends. If your program keys off of a trend, you're going to have all the greater opportunity to promote that program. The other thing is, and I think we can see this by watching news regularly, is that reporters love irony. Where there's an ironic angle, they start to get very interested. Even something like e-readers being presented at a library, to many reporters is going to seem ironic, since they may see those as a competition with traditional books. But if you can find an ironic angle, it's always going to have greater power and gives a reporter a new way that's tantalizing for them to tell the story. And then, while this is not something that I would hope that you probably want to bring into any of your programming, Controversy, as you all know, is something that the news loves to show. So wherever we can show controversy, the reporters tend to jump for it. They love two sides competing against each other. It just makes for some good news. And then finally, reporters also love to cover celebrity. Now, while you may not be able to bring in Brad Pitt to your event to get that celebrity angle, there are elements of celebrity that, again, when we use that local tie, can really resonate. Things like your local elected officials, things like school board members, different individuals who are recognized in the community as having some level of celebrity can help propel your story forward and help draw more attention to you. One of the things we talked about was how important it is for reporters, journalists of all kind, to be looking for local angles. And this creates real opportunity for you as a library because they're no longer looking just to statewide, national attention. Now there's new publications, many of them on the internet, like this Patch, that are looking for very regional, very local information at a city level and often even at a neighborhood level. These folks are anxious to find good information about local events taking place in their community, and it creates real opportunity for you to hook up with them. Patch is just one of these, but it's the most common. And there's different community patches all over the United States. It's owned by Huffington Post, and AOL. And you can talk with your colleagues and probably find out if there is a internet newspaper, regional newspaper in your community, whether it's Patch or something else, and tap into and use that effectively. Again, you have exactly what they're looking for. Local information about an event of value to their readership, so you should be using those tools. When you're dealing with the media, it's important to understand how to communicate with them and what they're looking for. We've talked about what they see as news, but there's also a way of presenting the information to them that increases your likelihood of being successful in working with them. So once you understand who your audience is and realize that for print, they're going to be they're going to be looking for depth. For electronic, they're going to be looking for speed. For social, they're going to be looking for places where conversations can take place. Then you need to think about how you want to present your information. And we do this with 3 key elements to every message to make sure that it works. And this is frankly not only for the media, but for all human beings. This is how we like to receive information. We first need to know what. What does the media need to know? What's the key information? In your case, it's probably going to be that there's going to be an event held at the library on such and such a date, and it will provide great information about this. So that's the essential. It's not creative, it's not brilliant, it doesn't need to be. It's the essentials that a reporter has to have. The second element of your story is the why. And this is what really is critical and where you'll need to spend some time thinking through this issue. Why should a reporter care about taking the time to investigate your program and to write a story about your program? Where's the news hook for them? And if you go back to what is news, it's the timely, the local, significant, the trends, the ironic, the controversial, and celebrity. Those are all elements of news they're looking for. If you can tie your program into 1, 2, or even more of those elements of news, you're going to have a higher likelihood of being able to excite them about this story. And then finally, when you're communicating with them about your program, you need to be able to understand what action you want to have out of that. What should they do with the information that you're presenting? What action would you like their audience to take? And in most cases, it's probably going to be attend this free program that's taking place on such and such a date. It may be, if you're recruiting for help with your program, it may be to provide some time to help out in this whole program. But you do need to think through an action. A reporter will expect it from you. It's just part of how they craft a different story. We wanted to walk you through a few key media and promotional tools that you may find valuable to use as you're promoting your program. These are tools that the media, whether it's electronic, whether it's print, or even social media, are very familiar with and often expect to see things in a certain format. The first one is the calendar release, and the calendar release is no great literature. What it basically does is it introduces your program, the time, the place, and any specific piece of information that people need to have. This one that we're showing here is a couple of paragraphs long. A calendar release could be just one sentence. The library will be hosting a e-reader event on Tuesday, March 3rd, 2013 at such and such a location. The event is free to the public. That would be adequate. The purpose of the calendar release is actually to get onto publicity calendars that most television, radio, and newspapers regularly run. Those are the little calendar sections that tell you what's happening this week. Now, in developing your calendar release, you want to make sure that you get it out to them at least 3 weeks in advance. They need enough time to put it into their calendar, get it prepared. They don't want to be doing last-minute things. So this should be one of the first publicity materials that you're going to get out, is a simple calendar release. If you want to get it out more than 3 weeks early, that's fine as well. They'll just slot it and hopefully put it in to get ready and go into the calendar section. So that's your calendar release. The media advisory is another tool that you can use very effectively, and most effectively if you're looking to bring in television coverage of your event. Again, a media advisory is a way of the day before the event and the day of the event reminding the press that this is taking place and that this has some real cash and news value that their viewership may want to look at. Now, we use media advisories all the time, not only with electronic or with television, but also with radio and print. But most of all, it's most powerful in bringing in the television stations. The simple format for this is a bulleted a strong headline that hopefully elicits some excitement. It is not important that the media advisory tell people everything that the event's going to be about and what's going to happen. More importantly, it needs to excite a news desk editor who can say, hey, this looks like something our reporters should go cover, and then they can assign somebody out. It is important, and the easy format of this is who's putting it on, what's happening, when is it taking place, where is it taking place. The other thing that you should include in a media advisory is, because it's primarily for television stations, include photo ops. If there's a great photo image that would excite them, that's one of the things that they're going to dive toward very quickly. So if you can include a photo op, that's great. And when we talk about the who, what, when, where, why, how pieces of all of this, the order is completely arbitrary. In most cases, you'll probably start with what. What is critical is they must see the when and where. That's what they're going to be looking for. This tool is best faxed out. I know that fax sounds a little old-fashioned, but for television stations, this is how you cut through that email crowd up that's out there, and they're used to receiving these on fax machines. So again, you fax this out the day before your event, and then if you can, the morning of the event. I will tell you that it's usually important, if you want to get television coverage, to then make a follow-up phone call to the news desk and ask them if they're thinking about attending the event or sending somebody out to the event. And that's the purpose of a media advisory. Here's a second example of a media alert. So this just gives you a more in-depth look at a media alert. Again, it's presenting all the same information: a headline, what, why, when, where, who, the photo ops, and I should have pointed out earlier, you must have contact information. Almost inevitably, they're going to want to call you if they're going to send somebody out so that they can verify what's happening, when it's happening, and they may come in late and want to call you and see if it's still timely to be able to show up. So that's your media alert or media advisory. They're really one and the same. I wanted to go over the news release as well, because I think for most of us, this is the tool that we're most familiar with. However, it's often used incorrectly. A news release is usually follows an event. It doesn't precede an event. Use your calendar release and your media advisory in advance to try and generate interest in the event amongst the media so they'll show up and you can build an audience for the event. The press release or news release generally follows after the event. And it's going to tell people what the event was, what kind of important news elements came out of it or discoveries came out of it. Usually it's going to include a quote, and it's a great opportunity for you to not only help the public understand some of the messages that may have been presented and the information that may have been presented at your event, but also to elevate the importance of your library to follow up with. These are usually either emailed or traditionally mailed out to reporters, and they can go to all different mediums: print, electronic, radio, television, and online. If you're doing online, you definitely want to email these pieces on out. Again, the format: simple headline, a date of release. You must have contact information, just as you would with a media advisory. And then you're going to come in with hopefully a powerful one-sentence lead. Then you're going to give more. We call it an inverted pyramid style, where all the meat is up top and it tapers down with less and less critical information as you move down. And then you'll want to finish with a closing tag that introduces your library and how to get in touch with the library if the public wants to get in touch with them. So that's your news release. In addition to those media tools that we talked about, there's a whole host of other ways that I know many of you are already effectively using to try and promote your events. There's advertising, traditional advertising, which is the actual placement of ads. And I would encourage you to think that if you can't afford advertising, you might talk to some of the different publications or media outlets and ask them to provide free advertising for you if they have space. In addition, you may be able to work with your partners, and they may be able to provide you with advertising space that they've already purchased or have in the docket. Signs are always great, and we should never underestimate the value of signs in place where the event's going to be held. But your sign should also be thinking about going more broadly and looking for different places that you can place that type of information. Schools, if you're doing a event with students, it makes a lot of sense to have your signs and your flyers in different locations where your audience is actually going to be. If you were doing it for seniors, why wouldn't you want to put some flyers up at seniors' homes, retirement homes, at senior centers, and so forth? The event may look like an odd add-on here, but the reality is that events actually play a role as well. And you can have pre-events that publicize a larger event. So it may be that you have, if you were having, say, book authors, a whole host of book authors come in, you may want to do a pre-event where you did a radio interview with one author who can tell you about why they do these, how they're working, and then you use that as a hook to let people know that in 2 weeks the library will be hosting a full lineup of different authors coming in, local authors coming in to talk about their books and how they write their books. Posters are another thing, and posters can also become poster contests where you have the opportunity to involve your own patrons in the development, or students in the development of posters, so that you don't have to go through the printing and every poster actually has a following just because it was actually made by somebody in the community. But beyond that, you can also produce posters. Your partners can help you produce posters and maybe distribute those posters. One of the things with all of these that I think is important, whether we're talking about ads, signs, flyers, events, posters, banners, contests, or newsletters, one of the key elements in all of this is you need to think through your distribution. There's a lot of time that can be placed into developing these. You need to make sure you know how you're going to put all these out there, get them up, and make sure they're part of the whole world. And when you have that together and you can pull together those media opportunities, that messaging opportunity, and these promotional pieces, you're going to be in much better stead to make sure that your event is a success and that you're moving forward in making sure that program really reaches the audience you want it to reach. So the important thing is you can create a fantastic event. You could have done your research to make sure the event really matters. But ultimately, if people don't know about it, there was no point in going through those exercises. So the promotion is the third and key element to making sure that your event is a success. You need to put the time into strategically thinking about who your audience is, where they're at, who they turn to for information, and then working with those different outlets to get the word out. And I think Jane Russell had a great quote about all this. Publicity can be terrible, but only if you don't have any. So good luck with your publicity on your event, and good luck with your event. Thanks.